Well, hello there, friends. I'm the Dead Broke Nerd, and what I'm going to do today is talk about the new cards that are coming out in the Elder Scrolls Legends Frostspark collection. These are coming out tomorrow. New cards, 11 new cards are coming out tomorrow, and I figured that I would go ahead and give you my thoughts on the cards and just sort of introduce them to you if you haven't seen them yet. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. We have our first card that was previewed. This was a week or two ago. It's Piercing Twilight. Piercing Twilight, I'm really pretty excited about because I think it answers a lot of the problems that exist in the current environment when it comes to graveyard recursion. It is going to be a little annoying for some people, myself included, because it does have an element of deck destruction to it. All in all, I think this is a very strong card. So what it does, it's a 4/4 for 4. It's in blue or intelligence. And when you bring it into play, you choose a card in your opponent's discard pile and banish, aka remove from the game, all cards from both their discard pile and their deck with the same name as the chosen card. So, if your opponent played a Fighters Guild recruit early on, for example, and you killed it, you could play the Piercing Twilight, target the Fighters Guild recruit, and not only remove the Fighters Guild recruit from the graveyard, but also remove all the rest of them from their deck. This helps a lot with actually two or three different very popular cards in the environment. Obviously, it helps against necromancers or Odierna necromancers who can come in and replay a card from your graveyard immediately as long as it has less attack than the necromancer. It also helps a lot against conscription decks, which are, as I'm sure everyone in the competitive scene knows, are running rampant in the environment. And the reason why is, in a conscription deck, if your opponent plays a Shrieking Harpy or a Wardcrafter, and you remove it early in the game, there's still two more left in the deck, or at least left in the deck or in their hand. When they play a Tullius's Conscription on turn 11, they have a chance of bringing in those same 2-drops, or the other copies of those 2-drops. Well, if you played a Piercing Twilight, you would not only remove the one copy that they already played in their discard pile and remove that so it can't be resummoned, but you can also remove all the other copies in their deck so that when Tullius's Conscription comes down, that creature won't be pulled because it's removed from game. So 2 to 3 of these guys over the course of the game is actually going to severely hinder or at least control what creatures a conscription deck is going to be able to pull. Now, a lot of people have said that this card probably won't see play because it's too meta. It's too meta, it's too focused on certain matchups. I'm not sure I completely agree, and the reason why it comes down to one thing. It comes down to guard. This is not just a 4/4 for 4, right? It's a 4/4 for 4 with guard. So even in a matchup in which you know it's not really going to come into play, your opponent's not on a conscription plan, or they're not running a purple deck or an endurance deck. I think it's endurance. I just go by colors usually. If it's not running one of those decks, and so they don't have graveyard recursion, this will still be a solid, even-statted minion to drop that will block your opponent's creatures. So I think the fact that it's guard is going to mean it's going to get slotted in certain decks as a meta tool, but also as a way to block aggressive decks. Where cards like Memory Wraith, which was a 5/5 for 5, still great stats, and discards the entire or removes from game the entire opponent's discard pile. I think this is basically a strictly better version of the Memory Wraith, and I think it's going to see some play. I'm actually pretty excited to do some testing on it myself. Deck destruction should never be underestimated. So we're going to go to that next one, Apex Wolf. I got to be honest, I was really disappointed to see this Apex Wolf. Anybody who's been on my Twitch stream knows that I have a really fun deck. One of my favorite decks is an Animal Monk deck, which uses all the sorts of some of the wolves, Elder Gleam Matrons, and things like that to summon as many animals and only play creatures that are animals or have animals in the text box. And this is an animal, and I saw the picture. I said, oh my gosh, another wolf. This might really sort of bring a little bit of something to this wolf synergies that are going on in the deck. Unfortunately, it's hot garbage, at least for that. let's talk about how it's a 4-4 for 6. That is a terrible stat line. Even a 4-5 for 6 would have been better because it would have taken it out of the range of Lightning Bolt. Now, you might say, but DBN, there's a last gasp on it. Well, yes, there is, but that doesn't mean I want to enable him to clear it with 1 card. I want my opponent to clear it with 2 cards, and then I'll get a last gasp. Which, by the way, last gasp is one of the most easily worked around effects. You either don't kill it or leave it around or shackle it, right? Or you silence it, which there are so many silences running around in the game right now. Now it's breakthrough and drain. That feels a little weird, first of all, drain for just a wolf, but I'm not going to get into that here. Breakthrough ain't that good when it's only got 4 attack. Also, drain means it has to sit around for the next turn, which, again, it probably won't because it is easily removed with a single card, and its effect is really slow. So compare this to other cards on turn 6, and of course, now, I will admit, this is not a bad card, a bad 6-drop compared to other yellow 6-drops. But then you have access, it even pales in comparison to things like Golden Saint, which doesn't even see play anymore, but potentially is 8/8 stats with guard for 6 if you're ahead on life total. Or Undying Dragon, which does see play, but less so than it ever has ever before. And that is potentially a 10/10 if the circumstances are right and it gets a drain. But you're competing with other 6-drops like Odirner and Necromancer, like Cradle Crush Giant, Genius Pathmage, Tel'Vos Magister, Doomcrag Vampire. There's so many powerful 6-drops in the game. I don't see how this is going to find a place in any of those decks, especially any sort of control deck, which is already going to have ways to heal up. Now, the exception is the interesting thing about this deck is it does not just draw a card. It draws the top creature of your deck, which means in a deck with majority actions and very few creatures, this is theoretically a strong tutor effect, albeit at cost 6. A strong tutor effect if you really, really need to see a specific creature in a combo deck that you can afford to not run a lot of creatures in. Right now, I can't think of anything. Nothing really comes to mind for me. But effectively, if you were going to run a Lonith to be able to pull a specific creature, this effectively achieves that in a slightly cheaper mana cost. This is not a good card. I don't even think that will happen. But theoretically, any card that pulls specific cards from deck, not just the top card, should be kept an eye on because of its ability to synergize as a tutor effect. So that's what I think about Apex Wolf. Like I said, I was very disappointed. I really wanted a big bad wolf to slot into my animal deck. So, rip. Shadow Marking. This is a cool card. I have my concerns about it, which I'll get into in a second. But basically, it's a 3-cost green action. You look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You choose 1 to put into your opponent's hand, and then you draw the other 2. So this is you're only netting. In fact, I don't even think. Let's see. Excuse me. You are not even netting. You are netting 1 card, but compared to your opponent's hand size, you're breaking even on comparable hand sizes. What it does do is it does cycle 3 cards through your deck. And the downside of you have to give your opponent a card, as we've seen with Mudcrab Merchant, isn't that big of a downside, right? Because people give opponents bad cards with Mudcrab Merchant. By bad, I don't mean a card that is literally bad, although sometimes with Mudcrab it is. But I mean cards that you know that your opponent, and especially stronger players will figure this out, they'll know that their opponent won't want to play that card or will have a hard time utilizing that card to the best extent. That goes the same with this deck. If you've played I don't know, Fighter's Guild Recruit. If you pull 3 cards and you don't really want the Fighter's Guild Recruit, you can give that to your opponent. But you can also look and say, well, okay, I could give my opponent the Fighter's Guild Recruit, or I could give them this extra word wall if you're playing Scout, right? Well, I don't really need a word wall. I have no shouts in my hand at the moment. Why don't I just give this to my opponent, who I suspect is also not running any shouts, right? So you get to pick the best 2 and give your opponent not only the worst one for you, but you can also give it a chance at giving them a card that you know they can't use. So the downside is not overwhelmingly bad. I think I could see some hilarious meme potential, and I'm sure Justin Larson will get right on that alongside the card Barter, which allows you to, and Gentleman Jim Stacy, to give your opponents random cards that they can't use and take their cards. That would be hilarious, and I would love to see that. Although I can't for the life of me see how it would ever win. But hilarious. The big thing that concerns me is that it adds yet another card draw, and not just a card draw, but a 3-card cycle to Telvanni. And everybody who's been on my stream knows how Telvanni is how I have some very strong opinions at where Telvanni is as a class, not just in terms of comparable power level, but in terms of overall ability to cycle through their deck. And this adds yet another card, which admittedly isn't great in the early game, but a single copy or 2 copies of this card in the later game or in the mid game is very feasible for a deck to play. After an Ice Storm turn while your opponent's rebuilding, drop a Shadow Marking. You're already ramping with things like Tree Minder and Thorn Histomage, so this isn't really that far off in terms of ability to have extra mana to expend on a cycle. So that is Shadow Marking. I think there's going to be some places where it's going to be really devastating, and I'm not sure if I'm looking forward to that or not. Karthspire Scout. This was Justin Larson's preview. I loved his little cosplay picture. It's pretty funny. This is neat. I think this card has gotten a lot of crap, and I don't think it necessarily deserves it. Why? Purely because it is ignoring the orc tag, guys. If you just ignore the orc tag, what you'll see is a 1/1 for 1, so not great stats for a 1-drop, but one that allows you to draw a card, and then it increases its cost by 1. Now, I don't think this is a card, and I may be wrong. Down the road, I can actually see an argument for why it might be good in an aggro deck, right? The reason why I don't see it won't be aggro is not the increase its cost by 1, but simply the fact that it only has 1/1 stats. If it was a 1/3 like Thornwell Terror, which every once in a while you'll see, maybe. If it did any amount of damage to their face like a Fiery Imp, maybe. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually show any sort of way to actually hit your opponent in the face and deal damage, which is the point of an aggro deck, right? However, I think what's really cool about this effect is that it provides a way to draw a card in the class that has the least, or in the color, not the class, the color that has the least amount of card draw and card cycle, and that's purple. So they have Enduro Mastermind, and that's pretty much it. They've got another couple cards that have like harder to use draw effects, but this provides a cheap way to do it, and because it's Last Gasp, it gives you a nice little 1-cost card to use for Betray effects. I would even be interested in seeing if Kais's Machinations, which increases the top cards of the deck by +2/+2, right? And then you'll draw. If you Betray, then you'll draw one of those cards that got buffed up. So now it's above the stat line of a normal one anyway, so it actually evens out. I don't think this card is going to be amazing. I think it will see a little bit of niche play, and I'm just kind of I think that people were disappointed because they wanted to see another cool orc tag, tribal tag, and this is not really doesn't have an apparent use in orcs. So that's the Karthspire Scout. Green Pact Ambusher. This is probably one of my favorite cards in this set. I think it's one of the most obviously strong cards. It is a 2-cost 4/1 Wood Elf. Wood Elf being one of the least, one of the cards with one of the, races with no tribal synergies. So that's really an irrelevant synergy, unlike had it been an orc like the Karthspire Scout or even a high elf. But it doesn't have any tribal synergies. What's cool about it is it's Prophecy and Guard. So although you would look at this and say, well, it's only got 1 health, how much is it really guarding? Well, here's the cool thing. At the end of your opponent's turn, if they have a full lane and Green Pact Ambusher is in your hand, summon her to that lane. Now, what do we know that likes to have a full lane? Siege Catapult. So imagine a Siege Catapult deck floods their lane. They get a big attack off with their Siege Catapult. You start crying. Oh, wait. You drop a free Green Pact Ambusher who has Guard and is going to slow down their lane one way or the other. Now, whether you choose to attack with it, whether you choose to let it sit and absorb an attack, that's up to you. But anything that's free in a card game is great, right? And this is a card that it can pretty easily become free. Even outside of Siege Catapult decks. You have decks like Halalu, decks like Token Crusader, or even like, I don't know, Goblin Archer, and Sorcerer, Mid-Sorcerer, which doesn't run it. You still find them flooding the Shadow Lane when they're pushing for a win, or as soon as you control the field lane, they just start jamming the Shadow Lane, and it's difficult to remove them if you run out of guards, right? Boom! They start flooding the Shadow Lane. You drop 1, maybe 2, maybe even 3 green packed ambushers. That would be amazing, right? I think this card is going to see some play as a meta counter. I don't think it's an auto include. I just think that it's a really nice counter to some of the popular aggressive play styles and will force people to think maybe I shouldn't go 4 people in the Shadow Lane, or maybe I shouldn't use Siege Catapults if I'm seeing all these people, and maybe instead I sort of put 3 people in each lane. It can be easily played around, but sometimes that just the fact that your opponent is thinking you might have it can make an impact. This will make an impact on the environment one way or the other, even if it doesn't see play in every red deck. One of the cool things about it is that if you get it as a prophecy, you're almost always going to want to, and not always, but almost always going to want to put it in your hand and then drop it down. But, of course, maybe that telegraphs that you got a green packed ambusher, and your opponent says, oh crap, hold on, I'm not going to put everything in the Shadow Lane now. I'm going to split my lanes. Of course, so that's the downside. I think it's a really well-designed card. I'm very impressed with Sparky Pants on this one. Torval Executioner. Sorry, this is a little grainy here, guys. Yeah, so this is probably the card everyone's freaked out the most about. 5 mana, 7/5, a dirty 7/5 statted 5-drop. It's a Khajiit. I don't think there's any Khajiit tribal tags that are relevant. Slay, gain Magicka this turn, equal to the slain creature's cost. Let me start with this. This card is good. This card is real good. Okay, amazing stats for the cost. A usable slay effect, which can also imagine playing this in Brotherhood whatever it's called, the Temple. Imagine this card getting double value. He kills a 4-drop. You get 8 mana for the turn. I think this will definitely see a lot of play, especially early on. I don't know if I think that it is broken, right? Because it is 5 defense. I think if this was a 5/7, it would be stronger than it being a 7/5, although admittedly the 7 attack does help you slay more things. Shoot, this does even kill Nahaglev, but let's not get into that. But I think 5/7 sticks around longer. It soaks less trades. I think, if you're dominating the field lane, you can't just drop this card in on the Shadow Lane, right? Because it needs something to kill if you want it to get its effect off. I don't think it's as amazing as everyone says, although I think it is definitely good. I think it's definitely going to find uses immediately in things like Dagoth, which needs more cards that proc the 5 power effects, like the Ash Berserkers and stuff like that. I will say in green. Now, I actually looked around, and there's not that many absolutely amazing. There are, but there's not that many completely dominating 5-drops in the game at the moment outside of green. Inside of green, you have Cliff Racer, you have Brynjolf, and you have Leaf Lurker, all 3 of which tend to be pretty consistently strong and have all seen play since they've been in existence. So inside green, you are competing for your slots at 5. But still, I think this card will see a lot of play. I think people think it will be nerfed. I don't know. I'm waiting to see. I'm reserving judgment to see. I think people might start packing more piercing javelins, though. Destruction Tutor. This is probably one of my other favorite cards of the set. I think this is a not great card that has some really cool synergies and might end up sort of forging an archetype around it, and an archetype that I would genuinely love to play. It's a 5-cost 3/5, so not great stats for the cost. It is a high elf, although who knows if high elf there's only been like 2 cards with high elf tags, I think. So it's not like that really matters. 3/5 stats for 5. We talked about that. That's not that great, but at least the 5 is on the back end, so it doesn't eat easy trades. Now here's the cool thing: it's passive ability, and that's right, it's a passive, which you don't see too many of because they can typically be a little bit hard to deal with. Your actions that deal damage cost 2 less. So anything that deals damage, lightning bolt, right? Firebolt, right? Sorcerer's negation. Any of those things cost 2 less. I think that it's already good. I don't think it has a role in any decks that already exist. But like I said, there are a lot of action-based effects that don't see play right now. You have, first off, you have a whole slew of sort of subpar damaging actions like Ice Spike, Burning Touch, Fire Breath, Firestorm, Dragon's Fury, I think might not be Dragon's Fear, Dragon's Fire, something. None of those cards really see play. Ice Spike will occasionally see play, and then usually that's not good. You also have a whole unexplored subsection of blue cards with things like Crystal Tower Crafter, Shimmerine Peddler, Mage's Guild Recruit, which is admittedly seeing a little bit of play in Conscription Telvanni. Stealer of Secrets, the 1/1 ward for 6, but it gets +1/+1 when it comes in for every action in your discard pile. There's a lot of really cool things. There's even in Mage, there's several high elf cards that get effects whenever you play actions. I think that this can also synergize really nicely with the new Mage Monthly, which we'll have we'll talk about that right at the end. I figured I'd throw it in there. I would love to see a action-centric deck that uses a limited amount of creatures that have specific effects that make playing actions easier and worth more. I think this is a cool card, and I like the direction they're going, trying to open up an archetype that is sort of just sitting there with unexplored potential. So the next card we have is Harmony. This is another card that a lot of people have said isn't very good. I mostly disagree. I think that it is feeding into the currently worst removal package in the game, aka the minus attack execute combo, the one that uses things like Grizzly Gourmet, things like Execute and Aerostorm that say if they are under 2 attack, you can kill them or turn them into Sweet Rolls. Cloud Rest Illusionist is the only real card that sees play, and then occasionally Grizzly Gourmet has tech choices against things like Windkeep Spellsword and Daggerfall Mage. This card, on the surface, looks like another card to feed that, and it's a 2-coster. You have to set up 2-turn combos, and that's partly why that sort of package, the Calm Execute package, isn't super strong, because it costs 2 cards to remove something. But I think this card is significantly better than a lot of people think, and it comes down to one thing. Yes, it's Prophecy, so it will get some use like that. But I don't think the value is in it as a Prophecy. I think the value in is playing it on your turn. Why? Because unlike Calm and Cloud Rest Illusionist, this card doesn't last for the turn. It lasts until the start of your next turn. That's right, guys. So you play it on your turn, play a Grizzly Gourmet, turn their guy into a Sweet Roll. Well, all their other creatures, all enemy creatures, guys, they have 6 creatures out. If they have 6 creatures out, that is a -12 attack that they're going to be able to contribute to your face for 2 mana. Saves you 12. Saves you 12. If they've got 4 creatures out, saves you 8. 2 creatures, saves you 4 for 2 mana. That's not bad. Because of the fact that it goes to the next turn, you can set up your effects like Execute, get it on the big target, and then they still will not have their buffs, unless they can silence. They still will not have their buffs to come in and attack you. So it's not just going to set up your play for the one turn, but it's also going to slow them down and give you a little bit of tempo back. I think this may have a big impact in decks like Monk, like setting up Control Monk, which is just like 3 or 4 cards away from being playable, and maybe even setting up as a package and control mage. I'm actually genuinely excited to see how well this card plays out, but I think it's one of the cards that people just aren't reading into it enough. Let's talk Deathhound. I think if I had to award a worst card in the set, it would probably be to Deathhound. And not because I don't want to play Deathhound. I really do want to play Deathhound. But simply because it is one of those cards that there's already a Hearthstone card that looks exactly like this. Not looks, the visuals are different, but it plays exactly like this. It's the exact same synergy. And that card was ripped off of what I believe it was ripped off of a Magic card. So this is not anything. It's almost like they ran out of great ideas, or they ran out of time. So they're like, okay, what's a simple card that will be amusing, but like isn't very original. And I was a little disappointed in this because it's a cool looking creature, and you were hoping it was going to be a really original effect that sort of played into Tessel's, sort of specific game mechanics, and it doesn't. It's kind of generic. It doesn't even really work with Ring of Imaginary Might decks because it's basically. I saw someone on Reddit call it the Hound of Imaginary Might. It already has that effect attached to it, but it's instead of it being a when this happens, or when you play the item, set the attack equal to the defense. This is a passive, so it's always checking. So the problem with this is, one, because it has guard, you can't hide it in the shadow lane, and then OTK with it on the following turn. And unless it lives, it's harder to OTK with this because it has to wait for a whole turn while still being able to be cleared by minions, as well as, obviously, action effect. And here's the other problem, right? It's super easy to trade against. Even though it's an overstated guard minion at 6/6 for 5, if your opponent was going to trade with it, like if they were going to trade their Leaf Lurker, just because we were talking about it, if they were going to trade their 4/3 Leaf Lurker and use a Firebolt as well, or let's say use a Lightning Bolt and something else, they can just use that ability first. If they Lightning Bolted the Deathhound, it takes it down to 2 defense. That means it automatically checks and takes it right back down to 2 attack as well. So then your 4/3 Leaf Lurker is going to trade in and only take 2 damage, so it'll actually survive the trade. That's the problem with Deathhound. Your opponent can order their trades in such a way that, unlike a card that would maintain its attack while its defense went lower, they can order their trades in a way to maintain board presence for themselves and play around this guy's slightly overstated nature. There's so many better 5-drops out there than this guy, and there's not even that many great 5-drops. So I would much rather play a Shadowfen Priest or an Indomitable Ordinator than this Deathhound, but I'll probably still play it. Alright, let's look at Sword of the Inferno. This is another card I'm actually very excited about. It is... So I'm interested in... And the main thing I'm interested in, I don't know if this has been clarified anywhere, but what... So the wielder deals 2 damage to itself and another creature. What is the timing on that? Does it have to survive the damage before it can deal the other 2 damage? That's what I don't know, and I think that's what will really sort of define this card, right? Now, obviously, you're not necessarily going to you're very rarely going to want to put it on a creature that will die from the 2 damage. But there are certain scenarios where if you've just got the 1 creature and you really need to deal 2 damage to an enemy creature, sometimes you would just have to slap this down, take the sack on your own creature, and to deal that 2 damage to another creature. So the ordering on it is important to know. But I think even if it works, even if it doesn't work that way, even if if it kills the creature, it doesn't deal the damage, I think this is still a really strong choice. It goes perfectly. It was clearly designed for Self-Damage Warrior, but I think it might even see play in other decks. This is a red card that can deal 2 damage immediately. On top of that, it even has a +2 attack bonus, right? So what other card sees tons of play that only does 2 damage when it comes in? Blackhand Messenger. Blackhand Messenger sees so much play because its ability at 3 cost to deal 2 damage to another creature when it comes in. Of course, then it can be combo with any other things. This is like a red version of Blackhand Messenger. You've got a creature out, you slap this on it, not only does it get +2 attack, it also effectively deals 2 damage, making it effectively a 4-point card for 2. And even the fact that it damages itself, if you're going face, you don't really care about that. And if you're hiding it in the shadow lane, they won't get a chance to trade with it anyways. I think this is such a cool card. By the way, card art is phenomenal. Beautiful card art. I'm excited to play with this, both in self damage, warrior, as well as just in red decks in general. I think this will start to see some really interesting utility. So that is all the cards that have been revealed for Frostspark, or as I like to call it, Frostypants. There is one more neutral legendary, which has not been revealed, and from what I understand, it will not be revealed. It will remain a surprise until the set drops tomorrow. But just for fun, let's talk about the monthly reward card, the Altmer Dragon Knight. This is the Mage monthly reward card, finally. Mage is probably, as I kind of talked about on my stream just a couple days ago, Mage is probably the most struggling class. I think this is struggling even more than Monk did for a while. Scout being only in a good position because it has a slightly memey variant of the Siege Catapult deck, and of course, Petamax's Abomination Scout. But Mage is struggling. Is this going to help? Well, maybe. It is a 3-cost, and Mage is notorious for having one good 3-drop, aka the Daggerfall Mage, and a lot of okay 3-drops after that. There's a lot of really strong 2-drops in Mage, so this guy coming in at 3-2 with a usable effect could be strong. Now, it's a passive. At the end of your turn, if you played an action, Altmer Dragon Knight gets +2/+2. So playing it on turn 3 isn't actually what you want to do unless you're playing some 0-cost cards, right? But the Altmer Dragon Knight does allow you to play a Firebolt on turn 4, and then followed up with a 5/4 creature. 5/4 for 3 is an amazing stat line, comparable to like the Feasting Vulture, which would see a niche play for a while, and of course it doesn't really see much play anymore, but every once in a while it pops up as just a raw stat 3-drop. 5/4 for 3 is really strong, even though you can't trigger that on turn 3 without some shenanigans. I think it also goes really nicely with our Destruction Tutor, right? Which reduces the cost of actions to play. So if you have a Destruction Tutor out, or even like if you wanted to play a Destruction Tutor on turn 5 after playing this on turn 4, you can immediately follow that up with an Ice Spike or with a Firebolt or with a Sorcerer. Well, not Sorcerer's Negation, because this is a Mage card, and that is one of the sort of downsides to this card when it combos with Destruction Tutor. At least Mage has no direct not Mage. Yellow has no direct damage action effect. So I think this will be a neat card. I think it will see some niche play, but I think it also contributes to that same sort of unexplored archetype of what is it like for Mage effects, or for Mage cards, and even blue cards in general, to get extra bonuses for playing actions, aka casting spells. I'm really excited for this card. I love the card art as well, and I think it's going to be a unique addition to Elder Scrolls Legends. So guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me today, talking about the new cards that are coming out. There's going to be a lot of fun stuff to test in the next couple weeks. I'm really looking forward to it, so I will see you out there on the ladder.